All right, there. I think we are. Yes, we are live. Live with Dr. Sasho MacKenzie for the fourth visit to the Golf 360 podcast. Sasho, always a pleasure. I really appreciate you always coming on.
Yeah, always a great conversation. Thanks for having me on, Pete.
So I was thought you might be in parka and wool turtleneck and layered, and especially this time of year. We're warming up. I think we'll be 70 something today, but I don't know how you do it in Nova Scotia. That's like I didn't even know how far up there that was until I looked at a map again.
Yeah, we're really far up. Oh, well, I'm pinned against the radiator in my lab, so I'm staying warm. The sunlight the last couple of days has been great. So the days are getting longer, but it's there's still ice.
No kidding. The worst was because I went to school at Ferris State, went to their golf program, and that was in the northern part of Michigan. And one of the worst, March would start to tease you. It might get to 50, and then it would snow and be 10 degrees again. But the worst was watching the Masters where it's 70 to 80 degrees. And I look outside and there's a foot and a half of snow. And it's like, how is this ever going to end? Because it would start snowing late October. So we're
Yeah.
6 months buried. But when I graduated, when I walked off that stage, there was not one footstep in the direction of north ever again. Unless it was to see my folks. I was up in Michigan 2 weeks ago.
I keep telling myself that it's easy to be productive. So I spend
Yes.
a lot of time buried in math equations and in hockey rinks. That's
Good
that's
for
my
you. It keeps
that's
you
my winner.
occupied. Now, we met. This is the fourth episode you've been on. We talked about obviously your expertise, biomechanics. The first one we did the stack when you guys were coming out to stack, and the second one the putting application, and the third one. And recently, you guys have launched the wedge portion of the stack, which is very cool. And if anybody's used it, you know how easy and simple it is to use. It's it's what Amazon did to shopping. You guys have done to practice. It's so simple and effective. But
Was the
really
plan.
wanted to talk about that and see the genesis. Like you talked about, the genesis of putting was based off mostly time restriction, and I get that's where we'll jump into it. Where was the were you seeing the effects, the positive effects of the putting, and then said, okay, we've got driver, we've got putting. Now let's work into the wedges and maybe even the irons. Is that where that came from?
Yeah, it was kind of, I guess, two main motivations. One was that we have a radar now that we felt like we have a speed training system. You need a
Mm-hmm.
radar to make it work, and we're kind of at the mercy of third party people. Like, what happens if PRGR decides that they're no longer going to make a radar or whatever, right? If they're
Right.
out of stock, well, how are we going to sell our system? So that we needed a radar to go with the speed system, and it's Bluetooth, and it's great. We did a few things. Got a speed threshold now, so you can take fast backswings and it won't trigger. So we were pretty happy with it. But then, part of the motivation was, okay, well, we're telling people to buy this other piece of hardware. Is there anything we can do? Like, can they use it for something else? What can we get out of this? And at the same time, I've done a lot of work with Rapsodo. I've developed their combines, which are great. So I thought, okay, I'm really into golf tech products that tell people what to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing to be like, here are a bunch of tools, you use them however you want to use them, but the average person's like, well, I don't know how to use this. So I
Yeah.
think it's very helpful. Like what we've done with speed training, it is boxed in, right? You do this baseline, then here's your next workout. There's no thinking. I like that. I don't even second guess when I do my speed training session. I'm in the middle of my final program in the winter. I go, okay, 255 grams, put it on. How long do I
Mm-hmm.
rest? My brain shuts off. I just do what I'm
I
told.
think that was a part of the attraction. It was so you just follow what it says, and then people got the results. That was the other side of the coin. That I do this, I get this. It's very simple.
Right. So we had the motivation to try and enhance our radar, and then it was, okay, well, what can we be good at? You know, uh, um, and I spend a lot of time telling people what the radar isn't good at. So because it's 200 and $80 or something. It's great for what it is, but it's not TrackMan. It's not even an MLM2 Pro. MLM2 Pro is amazing. It tracks spin really well, launching really well. The Mevo Plus I use all the time. It's fantastic. And obviously you got TrackMan Foresight. Here are the things you can't do with our radar. It does not measure spin. Okay. It doesn't measure launch angle. So if you're trying to dial in a technique, if you want to know, I've just spent some time watching Joe Mayo. I want to see, what is my attack angle? Am I launching these 30-yard shots with, 5,700 RPMs of spin? Don't use our radar for that, right? If you want to know what technique's going to give you the most spin, or you're trying to figure out your ideal launch angle, hey, go get on a Mevo Plus, a TrackMan, MLM2 Pro, Foresight Quad, whatever. That's great. We want to help you practice. Okay. That's the main thing. If you're trying to practice your distance wedges, and this is what we figured out, what can we help people with? So from about 30 yards to 140 yards, inside 150, we can get a very good prediction of your carry based on ball speed and a few other things. So our radar is communicating with the app, and what we're trying to do is, if someone makes a swing, they think, okay, we put a target up on the screen, you want to hit this 50 yards. I need to associate that 50 yards with an effort level, right? So I'm like, okay, what produces a 50-yard carry? So I make my swing. And what I'm predominantly trying to do, if I go from 50 yards to 70 yards or back to 30 yards, I'm trying to manipulate ball speed. That's what. So I've got a particular launch angle. If I'm hitting my stock shots, right, I've got a particular launch angle for me. Maybe it's 27 degrees, maybe it's 25, maybe it's 29, 30, whatever. I'm trying to send the ball with a different ball speed. I'm not trying to manipulate spin for the most part. I'm not trying to hit a special shot. I'm just practicing my distance wedges.
Practicing stock.
Right. I'm trying to hit these things 100 yards, 90 yards, whatever. I'm not crazy manipulating spin. I'm not trying to manipulate launch angle. I'm trying to manipulate ball speed, right? Let's launch this thing with predominantly through clubhead speed. That's how I'm doing it. So we are very good at measuring ball speed. We're within a mile per hour of TrackMan 95% of the time. And so we make some assumptions about launch angle, so if you selected your lob wedge, we're going to assume, well, they're probably going to launch it around 27. If you skull it, right? If you skull this thing, we're not going to give you an accurate measure of carry, but in my mind, that's fine. If I'm working on my distance control wedge shots and I skull one, I don't need to go to my Mevo Plus and say, what was the carry on that? I need to know. You go, no, I hit this 10 yards over the green. I don't care whether it's 12 yards or 14 yards over the green. I know what I did wrong. I sculled it, right? My low point was terrible. If I chunk it, right, and I get a ton of debris on the face and this thing launches at 32, again, I'm not really interested. When I'm in that practice mode, I don't really care what the carry is, because I'm not trying to do that, If I'm playing sim golf, I'm playing my favorite course. Those things matter, right? Because I want to know where the actual ball ends up, right? Don't use our radar for sim golf, right? It's no good. But so if I do make good contact, right? Hey, I've executed. I've launched this thing in my window. It's good contact. We'll do a really good job of telling you how far that ball is going to carry. And then if the next target is 60 yards, we want to see if you can adapt. Can you increase your ball speed and get that ball to carry 60 yards? And if you mishit it, then that's your feedback. Who cares about the carry, right? We're going to score you lower because it probably isn't going to go where you want it to. So it's going to be a lower score. So it's a practice feature. We're pretty good at estimating carry if you make decent contact from 30 to 140 yards. And there's other ways to frame this. The majority of our users, if you're forced to practice with a $280 radar, right? Then you're probably not, playing Pinehurst number 2 and Pine Valley and all these ranges that have premium Pro V1s, right?
Exactly.
So if you go out to your driving range and you've got some pinnacles that have a few of the dimples that are a little bit scuffed up,
gone.
right? And let's say you do a good job of setting up targets out there, 50, 60, 80-yard targets, and you're trying to hit these these range balls to those targets? Well, there's going to be variance in those golf balls.
Just a little
It,
bit.
just a little bit. And there's going to be some, if you get a 5 mile, like just a slight breeze. So the variance you would see in your carry distance due to the ball, a little bit of a breeze, is going to be within our error level. Do you know what I'm saying? So, you take Ping Man out on a range and you get it dialed in with a Pro V1 to land at 70 yards. And then you start feeding it actual range balls and sprinkle in a tiny little bit of breeze. That ball's going to land 3 yards short, sometimes 3 yards long, depending on the dimples. So that's within our error level, in terms of getting a carry. So it's very functional practice, in my opinion. I'm not a tour player. If I was a tour player, would I use it? No, I'd use my TrackMan, right? Now, I think that the practice routine that we have set up is super fun and engaging. So could a tour player use it? Yeah, probably, and get something out of it. But it's designed for those folks that, hey, this is what I'm working with, a $280 radar, and it's good enough for me to practice with. It's good. Marty's a much better player than me. He loves practicing with it. My wedge game's gotten better. So
not 99% of the golfers on the planet, and as you said, Marty's played in tour events. He's played in major championships, and he uses it. And
6 majors.
Yes, and it works. It gets him what he needs. For the listener out there that thinks you need a $25,000 launch monitor or you're never going to break 90, it's just not the case, because they're missing the fundamentals and the basics that they need, which is what you guys are doing for 1/10 or 1% of the price. It's like, hey, start with a $280 stack launch or stack. What would you call it? Launch speed device?
Yeah, speed device.
Okay.
Launch monitor.
Start
yeah.
with
Doppler
there.
radar, little thing. Yeah.
And if you can go from struggling to break 90 to now you're looking, how many times can you break 70 when you go out and play? Maybe then you can go find someone who has a TrackMan or Flight Scope or fill in the blank. But if a guy at Marty's level that's played in 6 major championships and can shoot 63 at the drop of a hat, can use it and find purpose in it, and it's helping him, and hey, you're average 15, 18, 20 handicap. Yeah, you don't need anything else.
Yeah, and now that we're in beta mode, so we did enough testing to feel confident that the Stack users out there who are, it's just a free feature in the app right now if you have the radar, right? Great. Then, hey, try it out. Let us know what you think. We're getting lots of good feedback. So some things we're going to add in, a little slider, I think, for the environmental conditions, and for standard launch. So we assume, if you're hitting your lob wedge, that you're launching it around 28 degrees. Well, my kid tends to launch it really low. He's down around, 24. So I think we're going to introduce a little, kind of think of it as a calibration. So if you find that the radar seems to be over reading for me, carry distance, or under reading, we can move those sliders around. Predominantly, we're going to be missing out on your launch angle, right? So if you launch it high, maybe then you slide that slider a little bit high, and we're going to get, predict a little bit further carry from the stuff we're getting. So we're not pretending to know everything. We're just trying to come up with a practice tool. And I think that the combine, what we've done in the app to make it engaging and basing it off strokes gained is really makes up for some of the lack of maybe the precision of the unit in terms of dialing in exactly for every shot you hit.
So I want to so everybody knows Teresa is running through a number of people's minds right now. Like where I teach and coach, we have the lesson tee is at the back of the range, and then there's a short game green back there. And if the lesson tee is clear, which it usually is, I can take students anywhere from 25 to 80 yards and hit wedge shots to that green, and we can laser off to the different flags on there. But if somebody doesn't have access to somebody like that, and they're just going out to a driving range, and let's say the range has the first flag starts at 150 and they go from there, when they use this device, they can hit a shot and it will tell them the distance so that they can start to adjust their swing speed accordingly so that they can learn how to hit a 60-yard shot and an 80-yard shot and a 40-yard shot. Is
Yeah,
that an aspect of it?
exactly. And so we do a baseline session. Takes about 10 minutes. So we ask you, hey, what's the shortest club that you would choose to hit with a full swing on the course? So maybe somebody's got a 64-degree wedge and like, I only use that out of the bunker or something, right? So then you wouldn't use that. But like, oh yeah, okay. Yeah, I pull out my, 60-degree when I'm at 80 yards. Okay, then pull that. So they tell us, yeah, I'm going to use my 60-degree. They hit 5 shots. We've got a little retake button. So in the baseline, we want to know, what is your typical carry, right, with this club? And then I'll say, okay, what's your next club up? And you'll be like, oh, it's my sand wedge. And so you hit 5 of those shots. And so we get an idea of what your full swing, if your ideal yardage would be for that club. How far do you want to hit it, right? And then once you get up to 140 yards, we're like, hey, you're done. So my kid, who's 8, he gets all the way up to his driver. So it's awesome. So the wedge mode is really like a full game mode for him. And then I think my favorite feature in the app is the Premiere mode. So we got a Premiere and a Creative. The Creative's kind of like putting, where you can design whatever little wedge games you want. With Premiere, we've got the practice set up in levels of challenge. So following from motor learning theory, where if you are a 35 handicap, we don't want the practice to be really tough, right? That's right, you want to kind of meet right. You're not going to come back. So the variables that we have to play with are the amount of shots you hit to a particular target in a row, right? So if you're 35 handicap, let's say you start at level 1, it'd be a lot of block practice. So you'll hit 12 shots to a 30-yard target and 12 shots in a row to a 60-yard target. That's your combine session, right? And you have minimal options in Premiere. We want to tell people what to do. So when you go in to do a Premiere session, it's like, do you want to hit 24 balls, 48 balls, or 72 balls? That's it. Just like a time limit, 10, 20, or 30 minutes. You could do 3 10-minute sessions if you wanted to, right? But if you're like, hey, I only got 10 minutes, I'm going to go play. I'm going to do 10 minutes. And then let's say you're a really good golfer, or as you progress, you're getting better through the levels, then we can we reduce the number of shots per target in a row. So maybe you go down to 2 shots per target. We increase the number of targets. So maybe instead of 2 targets in the session, you've got 6. We could go all the way up to 12. And then we can also randomize the target order. So
a lot of variability. You got a lot of variability.
There's a lot. And so let's say if you get all the way up to our highest level, you'll only have 1 shot per target. So it's like complete random, like you might go 30 yards, 102 yards, 64 yards. And because we have the baseline session, we will tell you what club to hit. So, and we worked in some logic where if, let's say your longest, your 60-degree wedge, you carry it on average 80 yards. If we give you an 83-yard target, we're going to recommend your lob wedge. So even though because that's kind of what someone would do. They're like 80, well, I'll just swing a little bit harder. But once you get up past a certain threshold, then we'll recommend the next club up. So if it's 85 yards, they're like, we don't want someone swinging out of their boots with their lob wedge. We're going to recommend the sand wedge. Now, if you want, you can override that. But we're using to try and get the most accurate carry we can. We need to know what club you're using. That's going to help us better predict the launch angle and smash factor and a few other things that will give us a more accurate carry. And the scoring is probably the best feature. So it's based on strokes gained. But strokes gained, and you use the putting app. So we actually use the strokes gained number, which is okay for putting, but it's really, really challenging for wedges. If you're like, oh, Pete, you hit a great shot. You just gained 0.1 strokes, on a tour player. And you're like, well, it'd be the worst video game ever. Imagine playing Tetris and be like, oh, I scored 0.074 points. Oh, I just lost negative 0.14 points. So like the average person, even I'm used to strokes gained, but if you said to me, oh, you gained 0.1 strokes or 0.4 strokes, I'd be like, that's a decimal. One can't be that much better than the other. So I've used just a simple conversion. Basically, you add 2. So the most strokes you can lose with a shot in golf is 2, right? So right away, we got to get rid of the negatives. So if you hit it OB, you'd lose 2 strokes, but in my conversion, you basically add 2. That gets you to 0, and then you multiply by 100. So you get used to, in the wedge game, a tour player level shot would score 200 points, right? So strokes gained of 0 is the average tour player. So you add 2, that's 2, multiply by 100, you get to 200. So that means that if I have a beginner going through the combine, there's no negative numbers. A really bad score might be like 150 points, but no one goes, oh, that's terrible. Like, oh, it's some points. And an amazing score would be like 220 points, right? And then what's really important about how we have the combine set up is that scoring increases exponentially the closer you get to a hole, and that's how real golf works. So we might look at it and say, oh, you hit a shot to 10 feet. Okay. And most times in combines and stuff, there's like a target. And it's like, oh, you hit it to 10 feet, you get, 100 points. And I hit it to 2 feet, but I'm still inside that target. So I also get 100 points. Well, that doesn't seem right. And it's not right, because that going from 10 feet to 2 feet, I've now guaranteed myself a birdie. You're only going to birdie less than half the time.
Yeah.
I'm birdieing every time. Right? So, the points should scale up really quite quickly as you get close to the hole. But, so going from that 5 feet to, 10 feet to 5 feet, big increase in points. Going from 15 to 10, not so much. Right? So that our scoring system reflects the reality of scoring on a golf course. So, then we do all sorts of things, like we track your best score, we track your records. And then in creative, you can create whatever session you want. So talking with Trip Eisenhower, he's got a system, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but he calls it the core number system. And so we're not trying to impart our coaching philosophy in anybody. It's a tool, but we give you with this, hey, this is how you can practice. But hey, look, you don't like Premiere, don't like the, challenge level concept of, varying the amount of randomness or block practice. If you're Scott Fawcett, you want to do block practice, no problem. He can go into creative mode and he could, do as much block practice.
He can.
Exactly. I want to hit to 30 yards and I want to hit to 60 yards. I want to hit 4 shots. It would do whatever you want. And he can still have the same scoring system. Trip likes to do core numbers. So he likes to figure out what is your best yardage to hit your 60 degree club to, and then he works away from that. So he can create these creative combines to find people's core number and then build practices around them. And then within creative is a compete mode, which is super fun. So
you can have friends that you can have competitions with.
Yeah, and initially it's just in person, but we're considering anybody with the Stack radar will be able to compete together, pair up kind of online. But with compete mode, you create your creative session. So I do this with my kid. Yeah. And you can handicap yourself. So you can say, hey, if I'm playing against my 8-year-old, there's an option to say, use the same handicap or enter the handicap of the competitor. And we know the handicap of the stacker, right? Because they've done all the other stacking stuff. So it will scale the guest competitor's points either up or down to be in line with the profile of the stacker. But what's awesome, I added this feature in kind of the last minute, is we give like poker, a probability of winning. So we know it's pretty fun. So it starts out and it says, if I'm playing against my son Marco, it'll say, Marco's hitting first, Marco's 50% chance of winning. As soon as he hits his first shot, that changes. So if he scores big, it'll go up, right? Which makes it super exciting. So you're going along and you're like, oh, I've got 20% chance of winning, but then you can kind of claw back into it. And so what we do is we go up, like we run theoretical simulations, Monte Carlo simulations in the background that says, all right, if this continues to play out, what are the odds that you're going to score these certain amounts, just like poker, right?
Well, I was going to say,
It's kind of fun.
was that Como's influence with his card playing expertise, where he said, "Here's the percentages and the odds and everything else."
Maybe subliminal. I want to try to make it as fun as possible. Like I want to make it like a video game. What is, I'm watching these people. I'm not big into them on my phone, but I fly a lot, and I see all these people playing these what I think are maybe mindless games. Like I don't even know what they're like, Candy Crush or like
Right.
all these things on their phones, and I'm like, what? Why is this addictive? There's nothing but it's the scoring system. It's the that little bit ahead of like the competition, the points matter. So trying to bring a little
Well,
bit of that into
it's
golf
very
practice.
cool that if you've got a group, and like if I'm here in South Carolina, I got buddies in Michigan, maybe some in California, that we could eventually have our own little tournament, monthly, quarterly, yearly, whatever it is, and compete
Yeah,
against each other, and you can adjust for handicaps. So I think that is like the AI was the gold of in my opinion, was the gold of the speed training. And I know AI is involved in all of this, but I think that is some gold in the wedge aspect, because you can play against friends that you grew up with, but you don't see, but maybe once or twice every couple of years. So it keeps you in touch. You act like you're teenagers again, talking trash to each other, and uh, could be a lot of fun. I don't know if you've seen that effect yet, because it's relatively new, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah. Oh, certainly. And we've been getting lots of feedback about how engaged it is. There's one guy who says he just sips whiskey in his garage, and he's got no and just does wedge stuff because he has is a setup with which a lot of people have. If you just have a net, no projector, you just got a net to hit balls into. You need about 6.5, 7 feet of ball flight. Just basically, if you can swing safely, you can do this. Another 3 feet behind the ball for the radar,
Mm-hmm.
and just watch your phone. So I see lots of people that have just the in warmer parts of the world that aren't in the garage, just the net in the backyard. You know, no projector, no nothing. Well, hey, this is a great option for you.
Yeah, it makes it easier for the masses that don't have, due to life, kids, work, whatever, that can't get to a golf course. If they don't have a golf course to go to, then hey, you can do this, like you said, in your garage, your basement, if you have the room down there, if you're in a cold climate, backyard, wherever. If you're not able to get to the course for 3-4 weeks, it's better than not practicing at all, and now you're starting from scratch again.
Yeah, yeah. And we're not trying to replace even the Mevo pluses. That's no, this isn't. I'm not. If I want to work on my spin, figure out my technique to get better launch angles and get more receptive pitch shots, I'm not going to use the stack system for that. I need to use the Mevo Plus. But hey, once I've got a technique that I want to practice, I want to get my distance control down with it.
Hmm.
Then this little stack radar is pretty
I
helpful.
think that's great that you have, if you take Scott, who's on one end of the extreme where he wants to do all block, and you take, let's just take, I would assume Bubba Watson would be the opposite, where he's never hitting the same shot twice. He mentally, physically doesn't want to do it. That doesn't appeal to him. Not that he's not going to do that, and everything in between. Is that's part of the let's call it the psychology of learning, that people can do that based off their the type of person they are. Is there also, because I know you're very good at learning and how people comprehend things, and have done a number of studies, but is there also something that would uh, let some, like for example, it's, I think it's still accepted, you tell me if I'm wrong, that if somebody's relatively new to a sport, or let's say new meaning less than 3 years, that they're better off training much shorter durations more often than they are training a lot, multi hours at once. And for those listening, let's say doing a lot at once would be like an Ed Cohen doing a 700-pound deadlift, and then he's going to take a week to 10 days off to let his body heal. Where if you're new to deadlifting, you might be doing 100 pounds, but you're going to do it 3 days a week, 3 sets of 10. Um, so as far as is there something in the app and within the system that accommodates beginners or relative beginners to say you're going to do this a little more often, assuming you have the time, versus somebody who's wanting to play Division One, or they're wanting to play mini tours or whatever. If a tour pro, is on vacation, he just takes his Stack launch device. Is there differences built into it, or is it still too early that you guys haven't gotten that far?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it is something that I think about. It's kind of analogous to speed training.
Mm-hmm.
We've left that part of it open ended because I don't know it. We don't know in the app enough about what everything else you're doing. I don't know how much time you have to practice. It's it's like with speed training, we have a window that you can train within, right? It's 3 days long. So if you train on Monday, we don't want you training on Tuesday. I don't care who you are. You should never train the next day. But if you're retired, 57 years old, super fit, all you do is, sleep for 10 hours, play around the golf, and this is it. I'm fit. Hey, then you can go every second day, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Um, if you are working 70 hours a week, have 3 kids, you're trying to do Peloton, you're like jammed, then maybe for you, and I don't know all that stuff in your life, then maybe it's I train Monday and Thursday for stacking. And that's best for you. So I don't know enough to tell you, or maybe you wake up and you have a bit of a cold. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, today's not a good day to train. I'm going to train, the following day. And I feel like we have to take the same approach to practice. So we do have a practice grit score. It's not grit score; it's practice grit. And so there's a fundamental difference. You can get a higher than 100% practice grit. And so the equation that I've come up with based on motor learning principles is if you can hit 168 wedge shots a week, then we're going to give you 100% grit.
Yeah, that's pretty
So,
good.
so that's about because with wedge shots, unlike other shots, you can the frequency can be a bit higher. If you're hitting 5 shots in a row to 30 yards, you don't need to take 30 seconds between shots. 10 seconds is fine. So you can hit 24 balls in 10 minutes really easily,
Mm-hmm.
wedge shots, right? And there's no recovery. You're at such a submaximal level. Really, you could get 100% practice grit. I'm getting back around to your question. Let's say you're busy, you work all week, you coach your kids in the evenings, but you got an hour and a half on Saturday morning. Well, you can easily get your practice grit up to 100% in an hour and a half hitting wedge shots. In 60 minutes, that's going to be your wedge practice for the week, and that's okay. That'll keep you at 100% grit.
Very
Okay.
cool.
Um, but maybe you are retired. You play golf 4 times a week. Well, hey, before your round, do a 10-minute wedge session, right, in Premiere, and that will get you to your 100% practice grit. So you're right. There for certain people, there's probably going to be a more optimal pattern to training. But I don't. To me, what trumps that is everything else you got going on in your life. It's not. You're
Yeah.
not a vacuum. I don't. If you were an NCAA division athlete versus a 20-year-old kid, you might have who's working. In an oil field, you might have similar physiologies, but you've got very different practice
Yeah, very
schedules,
different schedule.
right? Right. Yeah.
I'd learned a long time ago, and then I employed it with students, that wedge practice is so important. And especially for the players who are 12, 15 handicap that they want to get down to single digits. My first question when they tell me that is, how far do you hit your half wedge? And let's say you're 56, because everyone pretty much has 56. And they think about it, and then they say about, and then they'll give me the number. And I'll say, if you want to get to single digits, you have to eliminate about. And then, you're going to have to know what your distance is, because you have to get that proficient with it. But I equate, and I talked about this with Jeff Pellizzaro, that I equate wedge practice to and it has a benefit to the full swing, the same way that working on shoulder strength has a benefit to bench press. And that if you strengthen your shoulders, then you're not burning your chest out to stabilize heavier weights as you try to increase your bench press. So your shoulder's strong enough that's doing the stabilization, so that the pecs are used to push. If you're practicing your wedge swing, your swing has to be together in, let's say, a quarter swing or half swing or even 3/4 swing, that you can't have leaks in there the same way you can with a driver. If you have a leak in a driver, you can make it up somewhere in transition, or maybe even the downswing if you're really good. But a wedge on a half a swing, it's half the length, it's half the amount of force and everything else. So you've got to be, the golfer has to be together more to hit their wedge the way they want to, the distance they want to. And then that will, if they can do that, then their full swing will be more together, and they're not going to be leaking right from the takeaway. So it has a residual benefit to practice your wedge game outside of, okay, I can hit my distances now, but the positive effects on the full swing are profound.
100%. I'm really glad you said that, and I agree with you fully. Is that yeah, you can look at from a strokes gained approach and break down around and say, there's not much low hanging fruit. There's some, and for some people, it's massive if they can't hit their wedges. For example, Lou Stagner poses some good questions, and he says, um, the data on Arcos will clearly show that. Do you want to be at 40 yards or do you want to be at 80 yards on a par 5? Well, if you look at the group level, 100% you want to be at 40 yards. But there are a lot of golf coaches out there who kind of push back on Lou a little bit, and they'll say, I play with some players. You give them that 40-yard shot, it's going to be a nightmare. They don't want to be there. They want to be hitting a full 60 from 80 yards. Now, I'm on Lou's side because the only time that really would work is if you get to choose where you're dropping it. You hit it in water in front of the hole and you get to drop it 80 yards. If you're 220 yards out from the green with water in front, your ability to land it so you have exactly 80 yards in washes out. Yeah, just get it down there far. But if you have the option to drop it at 80 or 40, I can see the data. There are a lot of people who hitting a full 60 are much better off than hitting that 40-yard shot. I see it. But there's more that goes into it. So in the end, I'm on Lou's side. But yeah, okay. So the strokes gained, low hanging fruit isn't there, but I'm in your camp. The first thing that I do when I'm working with players or my kids is there's always a default to going to 3/4 swings or half swings for a lot of reasons. One of them is you can hit 200 shots in a row and not break your body down, right? You're still working on a lot of important things in the golf swing. But if you're trying to smash, your 5-iron full swing, it's tough to hit 200 of those and work on your grip, your positioning, your release. But you can hit 200 wedges, right? It's kind of like walking. You can hit them all day long, 3/4 wedges. So I'm with you. There's a ton of value in improving your swing through those sub-maximal reps with wedges. It's not just that you're trying to key in your distance control. That's a nice part of it, obviously, but it's very helpful to be able to, to work on aspects of your swing not at full effort.
And as golfers tend to be obsessive compulsive, whether they are in their life or not, golfers will do things exactly how you tell them, even though in the rest of their life there might be a major catastrophe. They never listen to their boss at work. But I bring that up because I told a fella that I was working with, I said, and he fit right in. He was an 11. He wanted to get down to a 5 or 6. And so we worked on wedges. He called me one day and said, well, your theory doesn't work. I said, well, tell me what happened. Well, I've been practicing my wedges for the last couple of weeks and I haven't really even gone to the range. And he said, I went out in the men's day today and I couldn't hit. My swing was in complete disarray. You can't just practice half wedges all the time and then expect your full swing timing sequencing to be there. You have to work on blending it. I mean, you can't take the whole bottle of aspirin when the doctor says take 2 and call me in the morning. It's not how it works. So that's just an example of, so somebody out there doesn't go and hit their wedges and gets online and says Sasho and Pete didn't know what the hell they're talking about. But yeah, so let's say a practice session would be work on your wedges to get your baselines and everything else, and then you would work on a week of really trying to fine tune your 60 yard or your 80 or whatever it's going to be with your clubs. Let's say a half a swing, and then maybe the next week you split your practice into your wedge practice and then some full swing practice to 5-iron, 7-iron drivers for the second half, and then you go home, and then the third week you can go out and you play a few rounds and now you've got both, and then you figure out which one needs a little more attention than the other, and then you adjust your practice accordingly. It's like, this isn't that hard, people, but golfers somehow some ways seem to make it very difficult. Throughout the course of this development, has there been any adjustments to the putting aspect or the speed training aspects of the stack?
Yeah. So, I made some miscalculations initially with the how we presented misreads. So, when the app first launched, there was just one button that said misread,
Mm-hmm.
and I would try to educate folks in the app by saying, "Hey, look, you can misread speed and you can misread line." And the plan was to, if you toggled misread on and you tapped your misreason as fast, then I would say, "Oh, you misread the speed," and we could do that thinking in the background, right? And figure out for so the person didn't have to have a complicated interface. But I miscalculated how many folks didn't believe you could misread speed. I guess I'll put it put it
One of the
put it
biggest
that
ones.
way.
Most people
Yeah,
misread speed.
yes, exactly. And I love watching golf with my kids, and golf unfortunately shows a lot of putts, right? When you're watching on TV, but to try and make it a little more entertaining, I'll say, all right, what was the error there? And even I had a lot of conversations with Michael Kim the last couple of months about and he uses stack putting about it's important to recognize, was it an error in read or was it an error in your execution? Okay. And I think most people, even tour players, you hit a putt, and it will be especially true at Sawgrass this week. You hit a putt and it's going up to the hole, and it just kind of falls off a bit to the right, rolls, let's say 3 inches past. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to say, oh, I pushed it. I missed that putt to the right. It was a line issue. I misread the line or I pushed it. No, to me, that's an error in speed. So if you're let's simplify it. Let's say it's an 8-foot putt. If that 8-foot putt and it's uphill only rolls a couple inches past the cup, you didn't hit it hard enough. And if you had to hit that putt fast enough, if we're on sawgrass, right, where the greens are pretty fast, you want that ball rolling at least a foot past on this 8-footer, right? You're probably targeting hopefully at least 18 inches. If you had to hit that putt with the speed to get it 18 inches past, it would have went in,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you launched it on the correct line. You read the puck correctly, probably, or maybe it was a speed read error, but the issue was the speed. But golfers immediately see the ball. We see the ball missing left and right on breaking putts, and we go, it was a line issue. It was a push or pull. It was a face angle issue. But from all the data I could look at, most of the putts are missed due to errors in speed read and speed execution. And so what we've changed in the app now is now that speed read, that read toggle is either I misread speed, I misread line, or I misread both.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's right in people's faces. I want them to think about that. I think that's super important for improving your putting. Let me give you an example. If you and I were playing a par three, okay, and it's 100 yards, right? We laser the flag and we're
Right.
trying to judge the wind, and you're like, this is a perfect sand wedge for me. You hit your sand wedge and falls 5 yards short of the green. You're sitting in the fairway 5 yards short of the green. Immediately, you assess, was that an error in execution or was it an error in reading? So if you go, no, I flushed it, that was a full sand wedge, that thing would have gone 100 yards, flew 2 feet past the hole, and,
Right.
and, and it spun back. It ended up short, so you immediately chalk it up to, I misread the conditions, right? There was more wind up there than I thought.
Yes.
There was more elevation, and you go on, or you look down and you look at your face and you look at the ground where the tee was, and you're like, I chunked it a little bit. So I read things correctly, but I hit it a bit fat. And that's for all shots that we hit into the green. We immediately make that assessment, right? But we don't do that with putts. Most people hit the putt, and I know this from getting tour players in particular when I try to walk them through using the Stack putting app. They'd hit the putt and it would end up, let's say it's a 20-foot putt, and it ends up 2 feet short. And I was like, okay, was that an error in your read? or was it an error in execution? Like when you hit that, did you think it was going to get to the hole? And they're like, I got to think about that. So to me, that's inhibiting your ability to learn. Can you imagine if every time you hit a shot into a par three and you were short or long, if you didn't assess,
Mm-hmm.
was that
Be lost.
me misinterpreting the conditions, or was it me not executing the shot? There's no learning there, right? So if you're not doing that with your putting, if you're not trying to determine what your error was it a read error? Was it an execution error? Then your ability to improve is going to be throttled back.
On the putting side, because you know that when we had lunch years ago, that we discussed a fair amount about putting, and for a long time I was doing a lot of study on that. And one of the things I found and was that from the psychological aspect, the physical aspect, and the neuroscience aspect, that all three of these things were pointing to very similar things. So one was, and I'll try to condense this down to a couple minutes. One was that a person's ability, once they're of a certain age, let's say 22, 25 years old, and they stop growing, their arms are not growing, their legs are not growing, so their cadence is coordinated. Obviously, you have kids, when they arms grow, then their timing and everything is distorted. But the coordination of the movement of the legs and the arms as they sync to one another, I have always told people, if you utilize that in your putting stroke, you do it 5 to 10,000 times a day, you're dialed in. So your argument to me, Mr. Student or Mrs. Student, that you didn't have your touch that day, I'm not buying into it, because you've done it all day, every day since you were 20 years old, and now you're 60. So you're 40, you've done it for 40 years. So your cadence should be okay. Your mental side is getting involved. How hard should I hit this? How soft should I hit this? Outside of gathering the information, uphill, downhill, grain, all that stuff. So the golfer's ability, once they get out of their own way, to dial in distance, because the brain, and the other way I explain it to people is, how many times have you reached for a doorknob and wrapped your knuckles into the door? Probably never, maybe since you were 5 years old. So your ability to predict the distance of a target or object is exceptionally good. We're animals. If we didn't, we wouldn't be here. So you combine that portion of the brain with the portion of the body that is coordinated to move in sync. And once they start to understand that, their distance control will usually fall down to whatever, regardless of what side of the bed they got on, because again, their arms and legs are coordinated, that they can control the distance very well within the ball. Let's say 1 revolution a second, tumbling just over the front, and 4 revolutions, which would shrink the hole but give it enough room that most putts that contact the hole would fall in. And then from the psychological aspect, 4 revolutions a second would be 21 inches past the hole, roughly 5 inches per revolution based on the diameter of the ball. So I think there is some variability in there, and I'm just giving you this information to use as you might see fit, that if somebody's 3 inches off, not on a 4-foot putt, if they're just 3 inches off, maybe their distance off, and you don't want them to hit it 21 inches past. But let's say on most putts, 12 to 20 feet, that I argue that a lot of golfers, if they're taught how to do this and get out of their own way and just practice it a little bit, that they can control their distance within a much, much tighter range than, let's say, a 3-foot circle, short and long. So that's 6 feet of variance. To me, that's not very tight. Let's say 24 inches from the front of the hole to 24 inches beyond, that to me is very tight. So I don't know how you could utilize that within the app, and whether it's a read or whether it's a speed control, but I'm not sure that on any given day somebody's going to have, from especially at tour level, when they're going from green to green to green, even though those greens they're trying to get them to consistent speed, how they're going to control the distance on a regular basis with just human error in less than 4 revolutions per second. I don't know if it's possible, just from being a human being, and that's pretty tight.
Yes. And so what the philosophy we've taken in the app is to look at it from a straight, I guess you'd call it, physics standpoint. If you had a 30-foot putt, super slick downhill 30-foot putt, and you leave it 1 inch short, that's a great putt.
Mm-hmm.
It's like phenomenal speed control. But the app knows that it was 30 feet downhill because we told you that was the putt, or you entered in that this was the putt, 30 feet downhill. And we also know that you tap in, So it was really short. So we know that was a great putt, but you still need to enter a reason, a physical reason why it missed. And it was you hit it too slow. Now, that's not saying that it was bad. It's just saying, yeah, that's the answer. If you had to give if what would you do to a robot to have them sink that putt, you'd have them hit it a little bit faster.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean it was a bad putt, but we know that. We know that, hey, that was a 30-foot putt. If you have a tap in, I don't care whether it was 3 inches short or 4 inches long. That was a great putt. It gets complicated to try and exactly have someone enter, was it a good putt? That's why we want people to interpret it. So we provide information. This is the way I think of it, is if you've got a 6-foot putt, everybody should get those to the hole. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
We want to try and optimize our overall strokes gained. Okay, so we're trying to make as many 1 putts as we can, but we're trying to avoid making 3 putts.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a 6-foot putt, we definitely want to be getting all those putts to the hole. Otherwise, we're going to be not making enough 1 putts, right? As you get further from the hole, all of a sudden, 3 putts start to become more of a probability. So we no longer want to be trying to maximize our 1 putt probability. We're not trying to have the ball hit the hole with its most likely probability of capture. We want to also factor in, right, we can't have this thing rolling 6 feet past the hole. So eventually, let's say for a decent golfer, by the time you get to 20 feet, you want to be trying to center your putts on the hole. Some will go long, some will go short.
Right.
Even from the best tour players in the world at 40 feet aren't trying to make sure they get this ball rolling past the hole, trying to center their dispersion on the hole. So we just want folks, and it's tough to factor that in for everybody, right? We want to provide some education, and then we want people to assess. The idea is you step up to the hole, you try to figure out, how fast am I trying to have this ball be when it gets to the hole? And then when you if you hit the putt, you decide, did you execute on that? Did I execute as intended? Yes. And I missed. Then it's a misread in speed. Okay. If it's short, if it's long. But if you're like, shoot, I could feel I had a little hitch in my swing there. I left it short. I read the putt correctly, but that was my own fault.
Yeah, so with all the variables, you got to somehow silo them so that you can make some sort of calculation on what they need to work on.
Right, and it has to be a simple interface. You can't,
can't
so
have one for every possible thing.
Right.
They need a computer.
Yeah, exactly.
And even though a phone's a computer, you need a supercomputer to figure out every.
Right, and we don't want people to take 10 minutes on every putt to enter everything.
That's
right?
enough of a problem already on tour.
Yep. Did you read it correctly? Did you execute correctly? What was that? That's what we try to feed in there. Yeah.
Well, if it's okay, I want to ask you about science. Obviously, you're one of the leading scientific minds in the industry with the various things that you're involved in. And as we talked in the pre-show, Dr. McGill was down here in Hilton Head. I spent a fair amount of time with him, and just watching social media and the arguments over things that I sit there and scratch my head. And years ago, it's well known in golf. You had disagreements with some other people who were scientific minded, so you're the perfect person to ask or talk about this topic with, because I'm seeing things, and one thing I'm seeing is I don't understand how two people can see the identical thing and see it completely opposite from one another. And then the other thing is, and another reason I think you're the perfect person to ask for this, because my 2 examples that I always use on can science hurt you versus help you, especially if it's used incorrectly. One thing I see in the golf world is the newest thing is in shaft fitting, that extra stiff or much more stiff than somebody should probably be using is recommended, because they can hit the ball in the center of the face more. And they don't take into account all the ramifications that that's going to cause outside of the 30 to 60 minute session that they're hitting in, right? You can accommodate and adapt in 30 or 60 minutes at most levels of golf, because and the work you've done with shafts. And then another glaring example to me in spending time with Dr. McGill was the notion were, and these things are correct unto them science, their own science, but in the bigger scheme of things, as we just talked about, there's a lot of things that it could be disastrous to a particular golfer. So, like range of motion, you increase the mobility and flexibility of a joint, you can increase the range of motion, you can get more speed, which you're obviously an expert in. But my question then becomes, and Dr. McGill's concern was, you can do that, but what's the residual effect to other parts of the body that should not have that increased range of motion utilization? That's a hell of a lot of questions and topics, and we could probably do a series of shows on each one. But I just see, and I was thinking even of doing a show, is science hurting your game and your body? But as someone who's experienced all of those things and is probably the best expert to ask on this, and all your expertise is, but it's just life and being in the golf space. Let's start with the first one. Why do you think two different theories can look at the same thing and get completely opposite interpretations?
Well, I think maybe they're not trying to answer the same question, or they're applying the science incorrectly, or the result doesn't match the situation.
Mm-hmm.
So let's come up with a specific scenario. So there's this idea floating around out there that a stiffer shaft leads to more centered contact. Well, to me, I would look at that as, okay, well, the first thing we want to do is optimize strokes gained. So when I work with a tour player, and whether they're changing equipment or working on a new technique, I've got a little combine test that they go through. They hit a driver using one technique, one driver setup, whatever. Then they go hit a 7-iron, they hit a putter or chip, they come back and they'll hit that driver again. They do that for 7 shots, and then they'll do the same thing with the next variable. Could be a different technique, different pair of shoes, different driver setting. Now we're at 14 shots. They'll flip back to the other one for 7. So in the end, we've got 7 driver swings, 14 in one condition, 14 in another condition. Let's run some stats, right? So it could be true. Let's say this is shaft stiffness. It could very well be true that, oh yeah, look, their centerness of contact is much greater with this stiffer shaft. However, we're now launching the ball 3 degrees lower with no spin, and this thing's carrying 15 yards less, and we've got less distance. This
Mm-hmm.
player was already pretty tight on the face, very good face to path control. So yeah, we've increased the centerness of contact. We've reduced the variability in the impact spot, but we've lost strokes gained because his ball's not carrying further. So, the dispersion's gone from 20 yards wide down to 15 yards wide, but we're 10 yards back in the fairway.
Yeah, you didn't get anything. You actually lost more.
That's no good. Now, the result could be that, hey, you know what? The centerness of contact was an issue. They were all over the face. So now we've got it down, and now it looks like a wash. If we could just get the launch angle up a little bit with a little bit more spin, well, let's use the stiff shaft, but let's put them in a 10.5-degree head instead of a 9-degree head. So I think it's the application of all these different scientific golf experiments that have been done over the years. You have to put them together. You still need to measure the outcome. What is the objective? Is the end all be all to hit the center of the face? No, it's not. We're trying to optimize strokes gained over the course of a number of shots.
Yeah, and what I've discussed with some of the believers in that camp was, I said, yeah, it's been known for 50 years that if you swing a piece of rebar, you're going to find the center of the face better. If you have rebar as your shaft. But I said, at what cost is that coming? And you just described one, and the one I always use is if a shaft is too stiff for somebody, and I saw this for years, that they're going to start trying to generate extra horsepower somewhere in the swing, usually from the shoulders. And as you see higher handicaps, they're always steeper. They're always more down on the ball with their driver. We'll use the driver as an example, and their spin rate goes up. So what does someone who might not have the experience do if they're in a fitting? Well, your spin rate's up. We're going to give you a stiffer shaft. We're going to give you a firmer tip. We're going to give you firmer everything. Well, we got the spin rate down 500, so we think you should use that shaft. But the overall stiffness is getting them, and the very rigid tip, if they don't adhere to that type, maybe they should have a softer tip. more of a flowing swing instead of a firm swing, it's just going to exacerbate their problem. And they're going further down the road. And I'm like, you got it, especially younger people let's say under 30 who've grown up with all tech. You and I think grew up in an era where tech came along after we knew some things about golf, and tech either affirmed or said, you got to change your ideas on this. I think this new generation is all tech. And if tech says something, they don't know any better. They haven't made the mistakes. So I try to tell some of them, so you got to watch what you use as what you're 100% right on, because that's usually what gets you in trouble. What you're completely convicted or have a conviction on is usually what will get you into trouble, as opposed to things that you're not quite sure about because you're still searching. And the range of motion one as well, especially as people say, well, I'm in a new mobility or flexibility program, and I listen to you, I got my stack, and now look, I'm going to crank on this even more. 3 months later, they come back and say, boy, my back is killing me. Okay. Are your facets, do you have a spine that allows you to have greater range of motion, wider facets instead of closer facets? Are you able to swing that? You use the stack, but don't go trying to get, it's going to get you more speed and you're going to hit it longer. Don't get addicted to say, well, I got 10 miles an hour, maybe I can get 20.
Right.
Because what's the cost, I guess, is the overall question I try to get people to ask themselves.
Yeah. I think with the stack system increasing, from a science perspective of speed generation, yeah, if we can, move the hands through a wider arc, if we can get the club moving through more of an angle, if we can apply more force over the hand path, more torque through the angle of the shaft releases, then we'll have higher club head speed. But for lots of reasons, you don't necessarily need to maximize all those out. Injury risk could be one. If you've got a particular issue at a certain joint, could be an old injury that you don't want to aggravate. It could be a predisposition to get an injury. There's no reason why, if you've worked with someone who's knowledgeable and says, look, this is the range of motion we want you working in, then you can't use a stack more like a John Rahm. Maybe your swing shouldn't look like Jake Knapp. Maybe it should look like John Rahm, right? And those guys might play probably in the average major at Augusta. They might have similar club head speeds, right? I think Jake's maybe a touch faster. But most people could probably stack like John Rahm without much of an issue. There's not a lot of range of motion. Now, you have to be an amazing athlete to generate that speed from that position. But so maybe you're limited overall in the population because your range of motion is a little bit less, but doesn't mean you can't build upon the speed you can generate in that range of motion.
Yeah, so I think people, and this goes for everything, as you know, Stu's information has been interpreted incorrectly, where he's dealing with damaged athletes or individuals, and people say, well, you can do this with this person. And it's like, yeah, but that person was just maybe out of shape. They weren't damaged, bad joint, bad back, whatever. And people will take your information and say, well, I only got 5 miles an hour swing speed. Yeah, but you got 5 miles more and you're not hurt. So like, what are we working with here? You can't just take somebody that says I got 25 miles an hour speed and think that everybody is going to get 25. Those are, call them the outliers, where the majority are going to get, and I don't know what the majority are getting, 5, 10, 15 extra. I know I picked up, I think 10 before I had to calm it down with my old beat up body. And it was great, 51 years old and back up to 118. I'm like, holy shit, this is nice. It's like a fountain of youth.
Yeah, if we look at the average is just over 10 with the driver for everybody that's stacking. That if we look at whether you've been doing it for 2 years or 3 years or 6 months, and to me, the approach, in my, if I had everything my way, I try to tell people that stacking's it's a lifetime decision. It's not a sprint,
Yes.
And the tour players that have had the best adoption of it have taken that approach. I'm not trying to gain 5 miles an hour next week. I'm trying to gain 5 miles an hour this year, maybe over 2 years. Ben Crane's been an awesome example of that. So he was someone who just, if you look at the chart, it's like half a mile an hour every 6 months. So you can't even see it. So sometimes He goes like 6 months, you get half a mile an hour. But then the next, 6 months, he gains 3. and then, because we've got lots of stuff going on in life, but, he's swinging at speeds now that he's turning 50 soon, that he probably was like, I would never be able to swing like that. He's over 120 mile an hour with the
Jeez.
driver. But it was long, and there's a guy who, it had a pretty beat up body. You know, he does now, in all fairness, he does an amazing job of taking care of himself, doing all the right rehab exercises. I don't know if I call them rehab exercises now, but maintenance
Hmm.
exercises. And he does a ton. He's done a ton of stack workouts the last few years, and has had no issues, and has seen his club head speed go through the roof
Well,
gradually over time.
I think if more people took that approach, and I was reading a lot of Pavel Satsulin's work again, especially after spending time with Stu, and it makes so much sense. And maybe it makes more sense to me now that I'm 52 than it did when I was 22 or 32, because then you think you're invincible and you got to learn the hard way. But the whole point was, don't fry yourself out in your workouts, and then you hit a wall and then it takes you a week or two to realize it, and then you got to take a month off. Do it slow progression, gain slow strength, or in this case, gain slow speed over time. So you're not hurting yourself, and you're taking 4 months off where you lose 50%. Now you got to gain 100% just to get back to baseline, and then kind of restart. I'm guilty of making that mistake myself. It's like, do it. Ben's model should be, I think, the model for most people who are, let's say, 40 to 45 plus. You don't have to increase a mile an hour every week on the stack. Just do it, and then look back at the end of the year. As you said, it's a multi-year or decade type development. It's not well, in 6 months I want to be 10 miles an hour faster.
And we're lucky. Lots of people post online and say, "Look, I've gained 10 miles an hour in the last 6 weeks," and that's true and it's real. And those
Mm-hmm.
people have had a lot of potential. They were probably really low on what they're maximizing at the start. They probably had some low hanging fruit in terms of improvement in their mechanics.
Right.
And so yeah, awesome. And those stories are real. That's
It was a
awesome.
perfect storm of they had the
Yeah.
untapped well.
Yeah, exactly. And the stock did a really good job of realizing that potential for them. But there are just as many people who, it might take a year to get out that 5 miles an hour. But if you're 57 and you're swinging at 100 miles an hour, and you turn 58, now you're swinging at 105.
Great.
Hey, that was probably worth the 45 to 50 minutes a week,
Mm-hmm.
to go at it. I like your comments about weightlifting. My philosophy with lifting weights and a lot of workouts, the same with the stack. As I kind of introduced my 14-year-old, now we've been lifting weights together for a couple of years, is and when I deal with track athletes, is that you never want to be sore after a workout to the point that it impedes the workout you're planning to do
Yeah.
the next day or the day after, right? My kids are going through a lot of different sports teams, and I always try to kind of get involved with coaching, um, at some level, so I can have some influence. And hockey in Canada, it's all right. Let's let's hit the ground running in August, and let's do all right dryland training. And they run these kids into the ground thinking it's going to make them tough. Well, now these kids, their groins are tight. They've done
Mm-hmm.
4 hours of skating on a Saturday, and we expect them to come back on Sunday. They're at a camp. It's like you're not accomplishing anything. You're not going to
Mm-mm.
be any further ahead in 3 weeks. You know, so if you're starting someone out with weights or with stack, we ease folks in. It's as you know, the I think that's like, I don't know, 20 swings your first stack session, and it should be no harder than you swing on the course,
Right.
right? So yeah, maybe the next day you feel like a little muscle tone. You're like, all right, but it shouldn't mean that two days from now you can't warm up and feel great. So if you're like, oh, I feel beat up, I feel like a truck hit me, and you probably didn't warm up well enough, or you probably went at it a little bit hard. Um, a general philosophy I like to apply is, hey, is it safe for me to stack? Some people are probably not in good enough shape to enter a stack program. Well, how do I know that? To me, the easy litmus test is, hey, can you hit a bucket of 40 balls and finish that with 10 hard drivers,
Mm-hmm.
as hard as you hit on the course in the wide open par five. And if you can do that and feel okay for the next 2 days, that level of intensity, those 40 balls hitting, taking divots, hitting drivers, is going to be about the same as we'd want with that stack session. Um, can you play 18 holes? So that if you're the weekend warrior, you haven't golfed that much, and those two, there are lots of people where those two things will affect you the next couple of days. If you've got a bad back or shoulder issues, if you can't hit 40 balls and finish with 10 hard drivers without feeling good the next 2 days, and probably let's get into some rehab exercises, do some mobility stuff, do some stuff. But then now you can get into the stack and start out.
Yeah, so if you're playing golf on Saturday with your friends in the whether it's 18, 27, or like we say, golfers are fanatical, they'll play 36, and then you got to fly out Monday for work and you can't get in and out of your airplane seat. You probably need to start back up a little bit and digress.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're not a training aid for everybody who's ever going to golf. We're a training aid for people who take golf seriously. You don't have to be the best golfer.
Mm-hmm.
You could be a 30 handicap, but you're like, yeah, I want to try to improve. I have a couple of hours a week where I'm going to practice. If that's you, Stack's great. Put some of that time into gaining some speed.
Yeah,
but if you're like, I'm going to play Saturday and that's it,
I'll tell you what I found out what worked for me when I was doing it was if I don't have the hour and a half to go to the range, warm up, hang out, talk BS with the staff out there, and then do my thing for 45 minutes or so and then go home. The stack is a great way to keep your swing lubricated, timing, whatever you want to call it. It's a great way to do that that when you do have the time to go back and apply yourself to golf, it comes back much faster.
I agree with
better.
that 100%.
There seems to be online continued that this more successful you guys get with the stack. Obviously, the higher you go, the more people want to pull you down, whether it's on purpose or not. But there seems to be, we talked a little bit about in the past, people noting injuries with using the system. And we were in 100% agreement that it was mostly people maybe who shouldn't be using it, that they needed to have at least a baseline level of physical fitness or range of motions before they get into it. But it seems to be that some of these studies are now saying that, well, if you swing it through air, i.e. the stack or any of the other competitors out there, that's going to lead to injury because you're not hitting anything or you're not going to get the benefit out of it. What would be your guys' response to that? Because it is so successful. It seems like they're punching at air, but I want to give you the opportunity to say, hey guys, this is what we found. Everybody listening, this is kind of what people are just throwing at us. They're trying to tear us down. That's kind of what I see. Now, some of them might have what they believe is a legitimate argument, but what I've seen so far is it's other people who might be trying to promote or sell some other type of speed training methodology.
Yeah, sure. And that's fair. Trying to get some traction. That makes sense. Might work out as a marketing angle.
I guess it's somewhat of a compliment in that they all seem to be aimed at you guys. So that obviously means that you're the leaders, and they don't try to tear down people below them. They're obviously trying to tear down somebody or get somebody above them to fall. But I thought, hey, it got John. Might as well give you the opportunity, a platform to say, hey, everybody, this is why that is not true.
Sure. I don't get too concerned about it or lose too much sleep over it. But, I think that, we're in a fortunate position where we've tracked all our users. We've got, I guess we're approaching 60,000 stackers.
It's like a big university.
Yeah. And, I don't know, we've got our top 5,000 users have gained over 15 miles per hour. And I mean, we've got hundreds and hundreds, of those top 5,000, I think 800 of them are over 60. And if you go on and look at our reviews, we've got people that have hip replacements, knee replacements, people that have used it for rehab. We've got, I think, a dozen reviews where people are like, hey, I got into a car accident and my back was wrecked and I've used your, some of them are orthopedic surgeons. Mm-hmm. So luckily, I guess, while I feel pretty comfortable, is that, if this was like year one, I'd be like, okay, well, we've got no evidence. Who knows? Maybe we are terrible. But we don't need to work in theories anymore. You know what I
You
mean?
got the
It's
data.
like we have the data. Like, the way I look at it is 5,000 people gaining over 15 miles per hour with their driver. We have everything as tightly set up as we can. Warm up, 10 swings with your driver, go through the program, do the same thing again, 10 swings with your driver. Let's compare the driver speeds. So we have the data that says it works. And if we look at injury rates, if you took 50,000 golfers, right, and we started tracking them now, and they weren't doing anything special, they're just playing golf, practicing, your average golfer. Well, a lot of them are going to get injured just from golfing,
Just
right?
from golfing.
In practicing, I'm very confident that you are at a much higher risk of injuring yourself by playing and practicing golf than by stacking. And I personally get way more emails that I deal with people, probably 10 times more emails that say, I've hurt myself golfing or in the gym. I need to get back to stacking. Can you give me some advice on when I'll be ready to start stacking? Sure, we get people that say, hey, I think, I've maybe got a little bit of elbow tendonitis from stacking, or I've got some hand pain, some irritation from stacking, and I'll try to help them address those. But, with 60,000 users, that is a very, very small percentage of people. And, it's a physical activity. You're swinging something fast. There's
so many variables involved.
There's so many variables, so when someone says, oh, this is a bad way to speed train, our method is better, whether it's you can't use this short of a shaft or you can't do this. It's like, we're not arguing theories anymore. We've got 40 million swings tracked. We've got 50,000 people. We've got everybody from hundreds of people that are in their 60s with injuries to tour players. Like Matt Fitzpatrick is not, no offense, Matt, he's not the most physically robust individual. You wouldn't look at him and be like, this guy can run through a wall. He's got thousands and thousands of stack sessions in, no issues. In fact, he uses the stack to work on his timing. He feels it helps him with his driver. This is an elite golfer that uses this thing to help him win the US Open. So you can have your theories, right? I'm not particularly concerned about them, and then if we want, we can get into the science. So I'm totally fine saying, okay, there's business, there's what the stack does, and I will have no problem pivoting to change the product if there's better science out there. But what most people don't realize is that I was into this for 8 years before we came out with a commercial product. My main goal wasn't to let's come up with a product. I wasn't sitting around going, I need a product to make money. I need to figure out a way to make golfers faster. And what is that? So I've got all sorts of prototypes kicking around in the lab. One of the first ones was a driver. So Ping made me some drivers. One where we pumped a lot of hot melt into it. The head weighed 255 grams, and then we also used a water cutter to scallop out mass out of an existing head, so you could hit balls with it. And one of the studies I did was with engineers at Ping, where they used these clubs, and did another one in my lab. And the results weren't as positive. In fact, the dispersion results was the main issue. The speeds weren't as great. People were still constrained when they were hitting balls. One of the main reasons why we do air sings is we want people to be able to explore movement patterns without being worried about contact. That's one of the main benefits.
And I've never seen anyone from the stack say, only use our system, don't use our system, then not hit balls. It's always this is a supplement to your golfing. If you're going to go to the range and want to do speed train with your real driver and a ball, this is a supplement or a complement to that.
We have it built into the app. Yes. Right? Speed priming with balls. Absolutely. I just got an email from a guy I feel like pulling up and reading it, where he just did, there's a little FAQ. Hey, I'm swinging fast with the stack. It's not transferring to my driver. Hey, do these speed prime with ball sessions. Check out this FAQ. He just said, hey, this is great. I've unlocked a ton of speed. So yeah, you need to hit balls, but we use the stack to increase speed. You can use it to work on overall movement patterns, but it's okay to think of it as primarily a gym exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Like not everything you do to improve your golf game, this is training, needs to 100% match. If you go to that, then it's like, just use your driver, right? Just use your driver all the time. It's like, I want to get faster at sprinting. I'm a 100-meter sprinter. Well, then just sprint 100 meters. Don't sprint 50. Don't sprint 110. Only 100. Always at a starting box. Always, that's all you do. No. Hey, wait a minute. What if we do weights? Well, if you do weights, you better do squats when you're in the starting box. Like, well, no. You know what I mean? So it's, if you think, well, yeah, you need to only hit balls when you do the training, then it's like, well, okay, I shouldn't use the Rotex motion devices. I shouldn't use lift weights. I shouldn't throw med balls. It's like, we're just a gym exercise. It's kind of close to how you move a golf club. And yeah, I think it's okay to work on things like path and weight shift. And you can think of it like a golf swing to help have some positive transfer, but you don't want to be dialing in your face control when you're doing a gym activity, in my mind. So,
I think some people are legit in that they're not looking for problem, but just in the name of good science, they're maybe challenging it to say, look, this is what we found. Now, maybe the discussion will progress to the point where they come to you and say, hey, Sasha, not out in public, but hey, Sasha, this is what we found. Have you guys considered this, or have you found this? Now it can evolve if it's really needs to evolve, and you guys can adapt it. I've known you and Marty long enough to know that that's what you're going to do. But if it's somebody out there, and I always go back to the first coach camp I went to at Andrew had, where John Sinclair did the talk. I think you were there. You were actually sitting behind me. That basically said that when he talked about the science world, someone had come up with, they thought there were 3 dimensions or something, and the guy found out there were 4, and everyone's congratulating him. So we'll do our peer reviewed summaries afterwards, but for now, congratulations. He said that was in the golf business, there'd be 500 people saying you're full of shit. That's terrible. So it just seems to be as an industry that we tend to drift that way. But hopefully that if anybody does find something, they do reach out and say, have you guys seen this or found this? Because here's what we're finding, and maybe it'll help you.
Yeah. So which is fine. And I, there's a tricky line between science and business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't published 95% of my speed training stuff because initially there was a point where I was like, yeah, I'm going to publish this, but then those kind of become, trade secrets. So if I had have published that research looking at using different driver heads to do speed training, then that gives someone else a competitive advantage. So it's helpful. It's helpful to me to know. I've also got one of the first products that I wanted to release. My plan was the threaded finger that we put the weights on. In my mind, initially, it would have been better to have the center mass of the speed training implement off the shaft, right? So you'd stack the weights on at 90 degrees, so then it would feel, and it was like, okay, we kind of got a face. But it wasn't. Again, there was one of those things that the dispersion increased. So it was almost like having people focus on trying to square up a face and be that tuned in with an implement that wasn't their driver, kind of negatively impacted what they're doing with the driver. Maybe that wouldn't be the case for everything, so that wasn't the product we came with. It was, let's just load it on the shaft, straight on the shaft. Let's make it a little bit further away from this isn't swinging a driver. And then the same thing with, okay, the first prototypes were 45 inches, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people had to make their swing plane really flat, or they had too many times where they'd whack it into the ground.
Yeah, it's
So
too long if
so
they're especially if they're swinging and trying to miss the ground.
right. And so then I was like, okay, well, let's see what happens if we shorten it. Is there other benefits to shortening it? And what most people don't realize is that when you swing the 195 gram, you are actually getting both a little bit heavier than the 195, but at 195, you're swinging at the same speed, but with slightly higher loads, a little bit higher forces and torque. So you're actually getting an overload stimulus while swinging at the same speed as your driver, which is a huge benefit that most people don't realize. Uh, it's not. I mean, there's a lot of research that's gone into this. If somebody came along, there's certainly areas where I think the product could be improved, right? No doubt about it.
Yeah, always is, especially as a creator. You're always going to say, "Well, if I did this and this and this," and like you said, there's reality, what you can implement, and then there's the scientific side, what you want to implement, and
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah,
they don't mesh for many reasons.
sure. But I think right now, that it's beyond theory, right? So that's to me, that's the bottom line. We could theorize about, this is bad. It's, going to mess up your golf swing, and I could say, well, tell that to, Matt Fitzpatrick when he won the U.S. Open.
Yeah,
Um,
after he
you know,
used it.
yeah, yeah. Some of those 50,000 people had pre-existing injuries. Maybe some of those 50,000 people didn't exactly follow the program. Maybe they didn't warm up properly. But we're, we're not going into it blind. I do inverse dynamics studies. I know the loads on the body when you swing it, and we try to go out of our way to keep those within tolerances. Just the same as if you go into the gym and you can lift the 40-pound dumbbells. I'm not going to ask you to lift the 110-pound dumbbells.
Right.
Maybe the 45s, push it a little bit. But people need to realize that, like, let's take baseball. Okay, lots of people will go play slow pitch, right? Or you're not just golfers, right? So we can't just stay in the silo of just golf. So if you take a baseball player swinging a 33-inch bat, they're going to experience higher loads on their body than the heaviest stack condition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Baseball bats are heavy. So if you go, okay, is it safe for someone to swing a baseball bat? Hopefully, there's a lot of people that play baseball.
Right.
And there's a lot of times when you swing as hard as you can at a baseball, but you miss it.
Yes. What? Yeah. What's the torques on that? And then the
Right?
eccentric loading. Yes.
So we don't tell kids, when they're playing baseball, don't swing unless you're 100% sure you're going to make contact with the ball.
It's a very good point.
They're swinging and missing all the time. This isn't a crazy high injury risk. Otherwise, we'd tell kids, we're not going to swing at pitches anymore. We're just going to have everybody swinging off tees, right? So it's not
Very
this
good point.
novel thing where swinging and golf is like baseball, where we don't need to be applying any force to the object at impact, right? So golf ball flies just fine if we let go of the club. There's some great baseball videos. I encourage people to look it up. Alan Nathan, I think if you look up in his site, he's got this clip where the guy is completely let go of the baseball bat, right? Ball hits the bat and he hits a home run.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. So there's there's a lot of things that we train for in golf and baseball. Baseball, the trail hand comes off all the time, right? So we're actually trying to release this object. We're not trying to tense up at impact. That's going to impact our speed in a negative way. I spend a lot of my time with stack training trying to get people to loosen up, throw the club head, right? We don't
Mm-hmm.
want to be stiff at impact. And if you can remove the ball from that, that can kind of unlock that flowing nature of the swing, That's a benefit in my mind.
Makes it, yeah. And, I was doing the fitting, mostly the younger guys at 20 somethings, college age or right out of school. They have the radar there. And I'd say, you're not going to, I would basically tell them your swing speed is maxed out without knowing how to do training for it. And this was 20 years ago. And they would say, no, I can crank it up. And the harder they would swing with the radar right there, their swing speed would actually drop.
Right? They get
5 miles an hour, right? Because they're stiffening. They're not, nothing's letting go. they're gearing up for impact is what we used to tell them. You gotta let the muscles go because you're inhibiting. You're basically running into a wall. And I would imagine you have the testing ability, or somebody would, that if you measured somebody running at a brick wall or a running back running into the line, that running back is actually tensing up and slowing down somewhat before they get in there because they're expecting
Sure.
impact. And,
Yeah.
and then they're releasing them, they're letting go as they get through the line, and they got to hit maximum speed to get away from the defender. Same thing in golf. I try to tell these kids. Some of them would listen. They'd say, "Oh, they had their eyes open. Holy shit, I can go faster." And the other ones would
Yeah.
just double down and it gets slower.
Right. And there's some, it's tough to see what everybody's doing because most people have a similar looking grip through impact. We can't really tell exactly what all the muscles are doing, but there's some people that give us clues. Freddie Couples, VJ Singh, their trail hands off the club. They've thrown that club head at the ball. Other folks, you can't quite see that because their hand's still in contact with the grip. But, between golf and baseball, the number of baseball players who take their trail hand off the club, if they were trying to be super stiff with their hands I don't think it would increase speed, and it certainly wouldn't matter to the ball, right?
So yeah,
that's something we know.
That's a lot for people to think about and digest. I think that is going to give everybody a lot to think about, at least till the next time you come on.
Yeah, I'll end with this. It's very different than hockey. Hockey, you want to be really stiff. You want to apply a lot of force to the stick because you're interacting with the ice. That's what's going to determine puck speed.
And that's
stick
from the instability of the surface that you're on, because you're on ice versus and your split grip and a whole lot of other things that are involved. Variables differ a lot.
100%. If you shot a hockey stick at a puck, right, the puck would just dribble off into the corner. If you shot the club head at the golf ball would take off. It wouldn't care that there was nobody on the other end, because it's the speed of the club head matters in golf. The force you're applying to the stick matters in hockey. We need to use that. Baseball is like golf. Don't care what you're doing to the handle. In hockey, it matters a lot what you're doing to the stick, and that's why in golf your hands are together, because you don't have to apply you apply zero torque to the zero forces through impact. Doesn't matter. Hockey, we need a lot of force and torque at impact, so our hands are split. Baseball, you can let go of the bat, and there's varying degrees. If you're punching somebody, matters a lot how stiff you are, right? If you're relaxed and completely limp, no, you want to be super stiff. You want to get your mass into the punch. You don't need to get your mass into the golf shot. If you're kicking a soccer ball, you want to be stiff. You want to get your mass into the soccer ball. It has to do with primarily the length of contact time between the foot and the ball, between the stick and the ice and the puck. And in golf and baseball, that impact time is too short for it to matter what you're doing to the handle of the object.
I wouldn't think there's any reverberating energy coming back in soccer or golf where there is. If you're going to punch somebody, there is a reverberation of energy back into the hand, arm, and body.
In soccer, there is. So in soccer, you want to be really stiff. That ball has enough time to deform and actually apply a force back on the leg. And if the muscles in the leg aren't stiff enough, then that leg will give, and that's going to impact the velocity of the ball after the kick.
That's the energy leak on the soccer kick. Makes sense.
Yep, exactly. The contact time is the defining variable there in those situations.
You got a few minutes so we can wrap up with some emergency 9.
Okay, emergency 9.
Fun questions. It's always interesting and one of the more fun parts of the show to see what all the world experts are thinking on these questions. So first one and last one are always the same. I've kind of interchanged the ones in between. So you're planning your member guests, and they're going to get the mood way up. They want a lot of energy, and they're going to crank some music for you to walk up to the first tee. What song are you going to have them play?
Yeah, Blow It High Dough, Tragically Hip.
Blow It High. What was it?
Blow It High Dough. Tragically. Yeah, very famous Canadian rock band.
Okay. Your opinion, because you see a lot of them. I'm very curious to hear your answer. The prettiest, or call it the best, prettiest, whatever word you want to use, swing in golf. Anybody, any tour, any person, anywhere.
Yeah, well, right now, oh geez, I like Jake Knapp's swing. I think that is that's pretty.
Hard to argue. I don't think you'll get much pushback on that one. Hollywood College, they said, Sasha, we followed your career from afar, and we're gonna make a movie about you. We're gonna do a Netflix movie on you, and we're gonna let you pick the actor to play you. Who are you, or who better? Maybe I should ask who is Lindsay going to have them pick to play you in a movie?
I have no idea. Ah, oh geez. Oh, maybe I'm trying to think. Maybe John Cusack.
All right, good. Most guys always go right to Brad Pitt or George Clooney.
I don't think I. No, that would be unbelievable.
Your go-to condiment for your hot dog at the turn. If you had to pick one.
Well, ketchup, but if there was mayo, I'd put some mayo on the hot dog as well.
You had me at ketchup. You lost me at mayo. I'm not a mayo guy. I'm a big ketchup guy, but not mayo. Another interesting one for you, given your involvement in tech and everything else. Your favorite purchase in the last year under $500.
What would my favorite? Well, the stack
Can be
radar,
a
but I
can
can't
be a
say that.
golf. Yeah, can be a golf thing. Can be a household item. Can be something you use. Anything, whatever your favorite purchase was.
Ah, come on, Sasha. There must have been. This is how unmaterialistic I am. I must have purchased something that.
Even if it like you have kids, so even if it helped you with your kids, if it was a rack for your minivan or anything, I'm just always curious to find out because everybody looks up to world experts and they think that they're not human, and some of these answers will say, "Yeah, I'm actually human."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Man, I lead a very mundane life. Well, I, um, I know there's something.
We can come back to it.
Uh, yeah, let's come back to that one. Let's
Okay.
come back to that one. I'm ruining the show, Pete. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're all good. It's rapid, but it's never rapid. It takes a few minutes longer than. That's my fault
Because
for the type of question.
that one is a really good question, and I'm assuming I know there is something. It's just not because I'm picturing myself saying this to people like you guys got to get this. It's been
If you were to
amazing. It's
text me
changed my
in an
life.
hour and said it was this, how did I miss this? You would not be alone. There's plenty of past guests that have had that happen.
Perfect.
Let's go on an easier one. Would you rather have your best round ever or your worst round in a hole in one?
Best round ever.
That seems overwhelmingly that's the one of choice. Maybe I need to change that question. Everyone's going to the same answer.
There's no controversy there.
Worst rule in golf. There's so many.
Oh, well, I hate the two-stroke penalty for out of bounds or stroke and distance. To me, it's
that's number one by far. That's the number one that people
just
don't
not proportional. It's not proportional, and the vast majority of people playing a casual round, it's not practical to go back to the tee, and most golf courses aren't set up where there's like no. It's just all pine grass around. Everybody in tour finds their ball. That's to me the biggest difference is that we got tour players that can hit it 8 fairways over and go hit their shot, win major championships. Jordan Spieth, all over the place, the British Open, and if that was the club championship, that's 3 off the tee. You know what I mean? Yeah. I feel like we need to rely. I know there's the theory of protecting the field, but I feel like we need to, if we rely more on common sense and asking our playing partner. Golf expects you to go into the woods and come out and say, "My ball moved," and keep trying. That's what it's supposed to be, right? But then we've got this whole other side of it with rules where it's like, no, we're going to go back and look at the camera. Oh, the ball, like.
Crazy.
You take a practice swing behind the ball, the divot hits the ball, there's a penalty stroke. No one, like, come on, right?
Yeah, I think we should get rid of the instant replay and all that stuff and just go back because it's as much controversy now as it was before, and it's like it really changed. Maybe somebody knows, maybe somebody studies that regularly that they say, yeah, it's changed this or that. But to me, as a casual observer of professional sports, I thought it was much simpler the other way. No one's ever going to be 100% happy. It's like we had it pretty good before.
Yeah, Matt Fitzpatrick. There's a million things. Matt Fitzpatrick's cracked driver face last year, where they're like, "Well, I can see the crack. I can fit my fingernail in it, but it's not separated." And the guy's hitting 180-yard drives with a 120 clubhead speed, and they're like, "Yeah, I can't replace it." And they get another rules official. He should have said, I can't remember who his playing partner was like, "Is that a little crack to you?" "Yeah, it's cracked. Would you play it?" "No." Swap out the driver head.
Easy.
No one in the world would have been like, "That's not fair." What advantage? He's clearly, hey, ask the guy you're playing against. Does that ball look plugged to you? Yeah, it looks plugged. Great. Move on. Let's
Let's not make it hard.
Let's not make it hard. It's too hard. It's too complex. It's the number one. The rules are a huge barrier to people participating in golf because they're complicated. Every NBA player knows 99% of the rules, right? Yet they have a referee. Golfers, there's no referees for 99% of the matches, and it's impossible to figure out the rules. You're supposed to, you know what I mean? Like there's just a disconnect there that makes no sense. Yeah, I hate the rules.
Yes.
I was hoping Liv would do it. I'm not, not necessarily a huge Liv golf fan, but Liv or NCAA would have said, you know what? We're doing our own rules. NCAA has different rules for every sport, than most of the professional organizations. I would love it if the NCAA was like, we're going to come up with our own rules of golf that make the most sense for us.
I had the idea years ago when the ERC driver and the whole Arnold Palmer USGA controversy was going on. My idea was to create a handicap system that was ruleless. That way, if whatever you wanted to play with, you could play with, and you would have a handicap with that equipment, and then you could play in your member guests or your friends' member guests across the country, across the world, wherever, and still have a handicap. But if that tournament, that member guest or that club championship required you to play by those rules, you're probably going to be at a disadvantage. If you're an 8 with your anything goes,
right? That's a good point.
You're probably going to be a 10, but you're going to have to play under the 8. So at least it allowed everybody to play and have fun with golf what they wanted to, and have a handicap and still be able to enjoy tournaments and things like that. You're not going to go to Q school and get away with that stuff, but how many people are going to Q school out of the numbers that play golf? So you could still around the world have a. Now maybe I don't even know how I do it. I guess I'd have to talk to some people and maybe try it here locally and see how it works.
There's some sound logic there though, Pete. Yeah. All you're doing is lowering your handicap to the point where, playing in a match with somebody,
and it lets
you're
more
just shooting
people
yourself
enjoy
in the
it.
foot.
That's the purpose of the game.
Yeah, there's some local junior tournaments that play, like my 8-year-old plays in, and the rules are, hey, where did you think the ball went in? That's where you drop it.
Keep it simple because you want the kids to stay involved.
Right. So then because that's the stress. Then when they go, they're 11 and now they're like, none of these kids, and as a parent, you're not allowed to talk to them, which I understand, right? In Canada, It's like, hey, there's that. So I get that. But then I'm watching and you've got these 3 11-year-old kids who none of them know anything about the rules, and they're coming up with their own wrong conclusions. And they're, the tournament organizers like, well, they all play a second ball if you're unsure. And I'm watching, well, now Johnny's got 2 balls in play and they're both by the wrong rules. Like it's just like trying to figure out, the kids trying to figure out the difference between red and yellow stakes, and they're not even marked, Well, the scorecard says it's supposed to be yellow. Where can we not make this easier for them?
Let them go play and have fun.
Yeah.
A couple more. Let's see. What's worse, a well-done steak or iron covers?
I can tolerate iron covers. I'll take iron covers. You can recover from that. You can't recover from an overcooked steak.
And then the last one, and then we'll go back to the other one. In your opinion, and you cross generations, so I'm interested in your opinion on this. Who is the greatest of all time? Who's the GOAT?
Yeah, I think Tiger is. I mean, there's a lot of subjective factoring in my head that goes into that. But I think
Tiger's in the lead on that, and it's very generous. Like James Lights was on last week. He said, I agree 100. I have said the same answer he did. Tiger played the best golf. Nicklaus probably had the best career. given Tiger's injuries and everything else. So I think that's a very fair assessment. But Tiger's in the lead slightly on all. You're the 170th episode, and he's slightly in the lead.
I think I like do the analogy to hockey. Gretzky has more points than Lemieux, but Lemieux was a better hockey player in his prime.
Mm-hmm.
Hey,
yeah. Would Wayne have done as much if he didn't have Messier protecting his backside, beating the shit out of guys? And you could argue that forever.
It's a fun conversation. I don't think you can ever. It's like fun to you never really know.
Good argument material with your friends.
Yeah, you'd have to start them off together, rewind, when Tiger and Jack are 18 at the same time and have them go through the same era. Who knows, Jack certainly has some qualities that he probably would have elevated his game if he was competing against Tiger. Would Tiger have had the same, work ethic and mental approach if he was born in 1950? Probably not.
Right. I think that the number one thing is that their competitiveness in their era is that those are the things that are probably equal, and that's what everybody can agree on. That's why the argument you can't win either way, and they're both correct. How do you win an argument where both answers are right?
Yeah.
Except my mom, when I was a kid, I said I was right, and she said she was right. I had to listen to what she said anyway. So sometimes both rights, you got to side with one. But if you haven't figured out your favorite,
I've come up with something.
Okay.
It was a Christmas gift. So I've got a lot of orthopedic issues, 3rd degree. You can probably see it's through the sweater, but I've got a 3rd degree separation of you can kind of see it moving there, my AC joint, and you see my left elbow is all messed up. So I get a lot of trap, rotator cuff issues, and my wife got me a ball that you can suction cup onto the wall. Have you seen that? And you can lean into it. So instead of like lying down on a tennis ball, right, and trying to find the right position, it's kind of awkward to lie down. It's this 2-piece thing. You put the suction cup on the wall, exactly the right height, suction cup it in there, and then this ball part slides over it, and it like rolls around, so you can like lean into this. Yeah,
like a massager.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, so I got it sucks. I use it in my sauna now too, so I get super hot, the muscles all loosened up, and then lean into it.
That's a good one. I'm gonna have to check that one out myself.
Yeah. There you go.
You speaking anywhere? I know you're always got something going on. Any new products you got coming out that I know you got a lot on your plate already?
Yeah.
Something we can tell everybody about.
A really cool enhancement. Hopefully it's coming out in a week or two to the scheduling of the Stack app. So trying to get more adherence. Like people are really good at doing it, but we want to help people at that. So after you finish your workout, now you're gonna say pick the time when you want to work out. So we show like here's the optimal window. Real easy. Click on the date that's in the optimal window. Set the time. Enter a location. So I'm going to stack in my garage, and then the final field is what I'm calling a stacking your habits. Comes from Atomic Habits or Thinking Fast and Slow, where you're much more likely to do something if you pair it with something that you do regularly, right?
Yep.
So the last line's going to be I'm going to stack. And then we've got a little toggle field. It's after, before, and you can put in your own phrase if you want. But I'm going to stack after my morning coffee, right? And then we've got some options in there. There's like preloaded with 10, but you can put whatever you want into those fields. I'm going to stack in my backyard. I'm going to stack at the gym. I'm going to stack. And then that goes straight to your calendar. And just the act of planning out how that's exactly going to happen. So you just finish your stack workout. My next stack session is going to be on Thursday. I'm going to stack after lunch.
Wow.
So hopefully it seems like a small thing, but it should
a big thing that helps.
Yep.
It makes a huge difference.
Yep. And then working on lifetime stats. So we've got multiplayer plots for coaches. It's going to be kind of like that. So you'll be able to track. There'll be a graph, some interactive stuff. You can track your grit score over time, your speeds over time. And a whole bunch of other features we're going to include. Yes. Speaking, started to make a little more effort to speak at my local PGA section. So presenting at that, lots of opportunities to speak, just not quite enough.
Not enough time in a day.
Time.
Well, I'll get
Yeah.
with Krista Dunton and Jason Sutton set up our local. I think they do that in April. I'll have them reach out to you and come down and thaw out a little bit, and we can pick your brain some more.
Cool.
It's been great as always, and you
Yeah.
you guys have always been gracious with a code for our listeners. I think it's still Golf 360. Small discount for everybody. So you're going to get a stack. I highly recommend. I've used it myself. I've used the putting, and I'm going to be using the wedge here pretty soon as I get released to start at least moving again. It's going to be
Sweet.
fun. I can't wait to try it. Sasho, thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me on, Pete.